What are they going to do after that and for the 5-year term, if at all they are elected to the position of president in the country? That is Raila Amolo Odinga and his running mate Martha Wangari Karua. That is something that happened yesterday, but also yesterday the presidential candidates now are down to 4. We had a high of 55. They were narrowed down to only 4 candidates. We have 4 candidates who will be seeking for the top seat. That is another conversation that we are going to be having here. And also the rise of independent candidates. If you have noticed this year, there are quite a number of independent candidates. They don't want to be affiliated with any political parties. They have decided they are going to do it on their own. What are the pros? What are the cons? What are some of the things that have come out? Some have argued that there are some punitive laws in the electoral system that could bar a lot of candidates who vie on independent candidates, not only in this general election, but in future. But we will look at that as well. All that plus much more, we'll be checking what is happening in the electoral sphere, in the political spheres, and any other thing that may come up. We will be having a look at that. And as usual, we'll be having a panel of experts here to help us diffuse all that and unpack that as well. Joining me now on set, we are honored to be having, I will say he is my friend because we have met in the corridors of justice as I reported on matters judiciary and the law on several occasions. He is an advocate of the High Court. His name, Paul Macharia.
Yes.
Karibu sana Council.
Asante, thank you so much.
Now, first things first. What do you make of the Azimio? Everywhere people are talking about the Azimio manifesto. What do you make of the manifesto?
So, first of all, the manifesto has 10 points, 10 key points. Mm-hmm. And of course, as you look at them, this is a way of trying to lure parties and Kenyans to vote for them. Mm-hmm. Of course, when you look keenly, there is the point about devolution, there are points about women, there are points about youth, there are points about the manufacturing and the processing aspect, and also there is about healthcare. Of course, when you look at that manifesto, it touches on the basic needs, some of the basic needs of human beings. Of course, we know there is food, there is shelter, there is clothing. Yes. So they have tried to mix the two, the basic needs and the secondary needs of a human being. Of course, we know the secondary needs may touch aspects to do with the employment, to do with the economic empowerment, do with governance. And I think the manifesto seems packed. It has really tried to touch on every aspect of the livelihood of Kenyans. And of course, their hope is that Kenyans will be attracted to it, for which reason they'll end up voting them in. Yes, and because you're an officer of the court, I'm quite sure one of the striking things is that Raila Odinga did talk about, earlier on he's talked about Martha Wangari Karua, who will be looking at matters justice, constitutional affairs, and they also talked about the fight against corruption. We have seen numerous cases at the courts. What do you make of it? Of course, we know one of the challenge that the governance in Kenya is facing is the issue of corruption. Corruption is deeply entrenched to affect the other aspects of human being. As I've mentioned, we have the basic needs and the secondary needs. Corruption has in a way affected the service delivery. And of course, to many Kenyans who have suffered as a result of corruption, their relief will be achieved if somebody steps up to help them in solving what seems as a big issue. President has occasionally mentioned about it. Leaders have rose as against it, but really the fight has not really materialized. There are so many cases pending in court. There are so many individuals working, yet we saw them charged. There are so much money that has been lost as a result of corruption. So it will be as a relief. One to the mwananchi, two to the public bodies. And also 3, to the institutions, the independent institutions, because ultimately they are affected when issues of corruption are touched. A good example is if citizens who ought to benefit because of the medicine, the COVID medicine, they are not able to get the medicine, the individuals who have companies and who trade and who participate in the procurement processes, they are not able to get a fair competition ground. 2, the government, using the taxpayers' revenue, it's going to lose money if whatever is paid for is not well utilized. So if as a country we get somebody who is to relieve us from the burden of corruption, being by prosecuting cases, by empowering judiciary, by ensuring that investigations are well done and well concluded, so that every person who is involved will be booked, I think it will be a relief. And that's why I think they are putting it on the forefront, hoping that people will be moved by it and ultimately vote them in.
Chief Justice Emeritus David Kenani Maraga and also the current CJ, Martha Koome, always talked about budgetary allocation to the judiciary, something that the Right Honorable former Prime Minister did talk about yesterday in matters of empowering the judiciary so as to ensure there's access to justice. Some of the cases have been pending for years. Will this be a game changer? If at all that is actualized, because manifestos are just that, manifestos.
Now, when you look at the fight against corruption, and specifically on the aspect of judiciary, on a number of cases you've seen more than 15 persons are charged on one account of corruption. In that one case, there might be more than 50 witnesses. Each person accused has an advocate. So you will have a battalion of 15 advocates for each accused person. And then the evidence will go to the extent of expert with evidence, forensic evidence, to be able to analyze the manner in which the transactions were conducted. So you can imagine a magistrate or even a judge who is hearing that case. And also remembering there are several cases. That case alone, even in a day, it is not even possible to complete with one witness. And the witness, the manner of in which the laws in Kenya allows a witness to testify, there are 3 stages of testifying. 1, you are asked questions by the advocate who called you in court. We call it examination in chief. That is where the prosecution will adduce evidence that will be relevant for that particular witness. And then after that, the advocates acting for the accused persons will come in to cross-examine, to cast doubt, to poke holes on the evidence presented. And then the prosecutor will come in to try to seal the loops that have been dug by re-examining. So you can consider, when you look at that, assuming it is only one magistrate who is dealing with such a case, how long would it take to complete that one case? Now, unless the judiciary is well equipped so that we can have numerous courts, numerous magistrates, numerous court assistants to be able to assist in availing evidence, in availing exhibits, so that if it is possible to decentralize hearing and management of anti-corruption cases, it becomes easy, which is a budgetary issue. If, for example, in Milimani we have 20 cases, assuming, I'm just giving an example, there might be more, 20 cases, and in each case we have more than 5 accused persons, in which event then we have numerous witnesses, around 50 or so. Then it will take time to conclude the matter, not to fault the court, not to fault anyone, but that is how the system is. Now, with an increase in budgetary allocation, the judiciary will be able to flex its muscles in terms of infrastructure. And infrastructure captures the personnels and also the structures. Yes, I think it'll be a good move if it is actualized in fight against
because
corruption.
year on, year out, we always hear about judiciary and the allocation. And away from the Azimio manifesto for a bit, because we are delving into that legal matter, is that the candidates who are seeking for the top seat, they have accused IEBC of unrealistic demands. We had 55 candidates. They were narrowed down to only 4, and they faulted the electoral laws that we have, and also faulted IEBC, saying that it's like you are working under other forces. It's like the electoral laws are so punitive. They want just to punish us so that we may not be at the ballot for the seat. How punitive are they?
Now, when looking at the laws, there is sometimes the laws are supposed to serve. The law is supposed to serve. The law is an instrument used by the governing bodies to serve. Now, when you look at the body like IEBC, it is supposed to act as accordance to the law that is putting it in place. And then we also say that ignorance of law is no defense. Of course, with the change, social change, there will be a change in the laws that are there. That's why you find that if IBC or if the parliament has enacted a law requiring that each particular party to adhere with some minimum requirement, one of the reasons why there will be some minimum requirement, so that not every Kenyan will vie for that post. Of course, in terms of the minimum requirement, there is a fee that one ought to pay. 2, there is the issue of the signatures. And 3, there is the issue of academic qualifications.
They seem very simple, but we saw yesterday they have decided, the laws themselves have decided to lock out more than 50 candidates, actually 51 to be precise.
Because the reason why the laws are there, it is to ensure that there is certainty and accountability and something that transparent manner of conducting business. If you look at the candidates who have been barred, there is 1 or 2 requirements that they've not met. Be it the issue of signature, be it the issue of papers, be it the issue of the other qualification that may be there. The reason why such restraints exist, so that we do not open gates for each and every person. Yes, as much as we are exercising constitutional right, right to vote, there ought to be some restraints so that at least there is order. So the reason why the laws and the systems exist, as much as they may bar some individuals and some colleagues from taking up the seats, as well they ensure that there is some order. Law is supposed to bring some order. And of course, you know, some laws provide the punitive measures in case one does not comply with what it says. Now, for instance, there is the electoral laws that provide offenses that may be there. The reason why there are offenses, it is to bar the people and also to caution them that in case you do this offense, this is what will face you. Now, the reason why there will be laws limiting or trying to, in a way, to limit the extent to which people can exercise their power. One, of course, one can raise the issue of discrimination. But then the question will be, what is the nature of discrimination? Of course, we know we have positive discrimination and we have a negative discrimination. It will be a discrimination for the sake of a better good, rather than just having everyone wanting to become the president. Of course, there will be other ethic issues, the integrity issues. All those are meant to ensure that you have, among the people who are qualified, you have the best to occupy that position.
And still on matters integrity, and also the right honorable former Prime Minister talked about it yesterday, is that the courts have been accused of assisting or aiding integrity questions, because Raila talked about, if at all you mentioned matters corruption and integrity, you have to step aside and everything will be done while you're away. But we have seen governors, they're still in office, they have pending cases in court. Some have gotten relief from the courts, some have been impeached, but the courts have issued a contrary opinion. Do you think perhaps there could be an impediment when we are looking for leaders and we want integrity, just as is enshrined in Chapter 6 of the Constitution? Integrity.
Now, on the issue of integrity, integrity touches on the issue of morals and the issue of values. Now, the issue of morals and values, there are people who view it differently. There are different approach to morals. In one section of society, for instance, you might see that there are people who see, for example, prosecution is something that is fine with them. There are others who see prostitution as something that is not fit with them. Now, when you are talking about the cases that are pending, of course, the Constitution of Kenya 2010, Article 50 and 49, they allow people, of course, when it comes to a criminal case, the law is that one is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Now the question is, when is one proven guilty? At the conviction. When is conviction arrived? Once the case has been done and the judgment has been entered as against the person who is accused. You've seen when somebody is taken to a court of law and you are convicted, you have also a right to appeal. You can go to a higher court to seek a review or a second opinion of the previous judgment. In several occasions, the court has found or have found that the judgment that was entered against you was in error and the judgment is overturned. So the issue of the presumption of innocence, it's as much as we might see it is favoring politicians, it is a right that ought to be enjoyed by every Kenyan. It is a constitutional right. And when we look at the history and the reasons why such a right exists, previously, before we got the Constitution 2010, somebody would hate you by the way of your look. And by mere look and by mere appearance, you are condemned, you are charged, and you are convicted, something that you've not committed. Now the Constitution changed the outlook and the manner in which individuals are treated. You can't just say because you are charged, you are guilty. When you go to court, it is the evidence that is brought that will convict you. This evidence will have to be looked at by the court and by the accused person and the advocates, and then they are satisfied. Because one of the principle in the argument that exists, that every person accused has a right to face the accusers and challenge the evidence they are taking into court. The reason is some people can just have cases for ulterior motives. An example I'll give, because this is the area I practice in issues of defilement. Someone can come up with reasons just to eliminate you by giving reasons to suspect that you are the person who defiled a minor. Of course, we've seen it. Previously, there was a report in the media where a person was jailed, he was convicted, and then one of the witnesses, being the child, came up and said, I framed my dad. He did not do the act. Now, assuming we don't have systems to safeguard as against those claims, the society will be in chaos. So it is a requirement of law that once you are charged, go to court. Challenge the evidence. Let your accusers come to court. Let them tell the court.
Okay, hold the thought, Wakili. Welcome back. We are discussing the state of politics in the country. Yesterday, Azimio, la Umoja One Kenya Coalition, did release officially launch their manifesto, a 10-point, you can call them their 10 commandments on what they are going to do for this country if at all Kenyans decide to pick them as the president in the 2022 succession politics. And now joining me, we were with Wakili, now we have a politician, and he is vying for the Senatorial seat here in the county of Nairobi, and he is using the KANU ticket, the oldest chama cha baba na mama. His name is Engineer John Otachi. Karibu sana, Engineer.
Thank you very much.
First things first, it was an Azimio, KANU is in Azimio. Yes. It was an Azimio manifesto. What do you make of it?
It is one of the most progressive manifestos yet that we've had as a country. It revives hope because it touches on the key sectors that would ensure that as a country we move forward and we build on what we have achieved so far as a country. Yes.
What stood out? I saw Moses Kuri in his Facebook page did say that nothing new here. We've had this, but what really struck you?
First of all, to address what the Honorable Moses Kuri said, you know, we do not expect to get things off Mars. We are here, we are in Kenya, so we have to build on what we already have. So we don't expect anything spectacularly new. We need to only improve on what we already have in place. So what stood out for me, and this is very key, is what I'm passionate about, and is what I promised to like champion when I joined the Senate. It is the focus that the Honorable Raila has on devolution.
So 35%?
Strengthen, yes, exactly, exactly. Okay. And it could even go higher, you know, depending on how things pan out. Yeah, when we get to the Senate, you know, we make laws, we can review the laws. Money is supposed to trickle down to the people where it's supposed to have the most impact. So that's the most outstanding thing, and I'm sure that Baba is passionate about it. I am sure he's going to focus on it, and he will most likely, or definitely deliver on the same promise.
And still on that, on the devolution, because that is one of the key pillars he talked about, and even in his campaign rallies, he has talked about strengthening devolution. And 35%, we have seen, we have had cases, Wakili can bear me witness, we've had cases in terms of revenue allocation, go all the way to the apex court.
Yes.
35% is not quite ambitious.
It is achievable.
Because you've even said it can go higher. Yes, it can. But
it is achievable.
We have the willpower to do that.
Definitely, you know, if you have the driver who is going to be Baba, the fifth, and he is committed to do that, then it is achievable.
But you said you also need to be realistic. 35 from around 15-20% to 35 is quite ambitious, if you ask me.
It depends. If you look at what makes sense is how many functions have been devolved. Yeah, for the sake of arguments. We are having like 1,000 units of money to spend. 35% is about 350 units. So we have a whopping 650 units which are left for the national government functions. So it is possible and it's achievable.
Wakil, let me drag you into this. When we talk about party manifestos, Raila is doing his 5th stab. So meaning he has had 5 presidential manifestos. We have had the Jubilee manifesto, we had the TNA manifesto, you remember the laptops, the 6 stadiums. Can we have or formulate laws that bind a presidential candidate to his manifesto? Because there's no point of lying to Kenyans or telling Kenyans you'll do ABCD, but when you get power, when you seize power, we don't see those things. Can we have laws that can even tie somebody to that, to his word?
No, yes, first thing first. In the Constitution of Kenya, we recognize the rule of law. Then the question that we'll ask ourselves, is a manifesto a law? Of course we know. Then when we ask ourselves whether a manifesto is a law, then the next question that we'll ask ourselves, how are the laws created? We know in Kenya, the laws are created by the parliament through the legislation. They are also created by the courts through judicial interpretations. And then, what is the status of a manifesto? Then, to my view, my understanding, it is not a law per se. It is just a promise. Because you understand, we have 3 organs of the government. We have the executive, we have the parliament, and then we have the judiciary. What happens when as new systems comes into place? When they agree as a government, there is what the government agenda. The government agenda can be driven in the parliament, and then the laws can be enacted to fulfill the government agenda. Of course, that's why the issue of the number is key to every candidate that is clinching the seat. Because when you want a law passed, majority of laws, they just need a simple majority of the parliamentarians, then the law will be passed. Even when you have a very good idea and it is not in line with government ideals, government agendas, it is not very possible to have that pass in the parliament. When you go to the court, when you have the interpretation of a document in a manner that ought to propel that it be a law, unless it is anchored in the constitution and the created systems and the laws, it can't be passed as a law. Then a manifesto, to my understanding, is just a promise. It's a promise of goodwill. I'm saying, I have been there, I have seen your problems, I can solve them. But you also understand, if Baba is making the promises as an individual, once he gets into the power, you know, Baba cannot go to parliament to legislate. He can't. He can't go to the courts to decide cases of corruption. The much that he can do as the head of the executive, it is to avail the resources needed by the other independent organs. So it's just a promise of goodwill, which if Kenyans are convinced and they agree with it, they'll say, let's try and see whether things will work. But one can be held accountable if that is a law. It's not a law. Beauty and the joy is in our constitution we have systems to check the leaders.
Okay, hold the thought. Council, you were mentioning something. Kindly, can you?
Yes, I was saying.
Yes.
That manifesto is a promise.
It's a social
we cannot tie
yes,
them
it's a
to,
social contract.
But it can't be a lie, man. We've seen them.
What happens?
A lot of
what
things.
happens? What comes with the manifesto is what we call a legitimate expectation. That a legitimate expectation, once it gets to the minds of Kenyans and they see that we have a legitimate expectation that Baba will fulfill the promises. It applies to all other leaders. They come to us, they promise heaven, they promise water, they promise roads. And then we have a legitimate expectation that if that is fulfilled, our needs will be met. But then we understand, once they get into power, there are other dynamics that ought to work towards the fulfillment of that goal. Jubilee had the big 4 agendas. Then we can ask ourselves, how many of them have been fulfilled? How many promises by Jubilee have been fulfilled? Of course, when we ask them, they will cite challenges. This is expected. But what we understand, as I said, is a document of a goodwill. And with hope that everything will work towards fulfilling it. But no one can really go to court and say, you said this, you lied.
Otachi, I'm quite sure you have some promises you want to make to Nairobians, and you would like them to hold you accountable. Would you want leaders, and especially now that we are just about to elect new ones, to be held accountable for what they promise Kenyans to do for them?
Precisely. One of the reasons, or the major reason why I'm running, is because of the need to have leaders that are accountable, that do what they promise, leaders that listen to the people, leaders that represent the aspirations of the people. So I have my agenda, which you can call a manifesto. As you understand, my role is mostly legislative, oversight, and representation. But that one is a summary of what we what we require to operate as a nation. When you're representing the people, for example, on the issue of healthcare, we can do legislation which affects how people receive this healthcare. Baba has promised the Baba Care, universal health for everyone. So it will be our role as senators, our legislators, to ensure that this is enshrined in law, so that even resources are allocated to be able to fulfill the promise that Baba has made. Yeah, so yes, we look forward to accountability, and we will make the leaders accountable to the promises.
I'm trying to just look at some of the things that Baba talked about yesterday, and this question is directly to you, because you are seeking a seat in Nairobi, public debt overhaul, seeking debt relief, cash transfer program, 7 years holiday tax for the youth. Looking at this manifesto,
yes,
vis-a-vis the needs and aspirations of Nairobi,
yes,
as a county,
yes,
how can you compare the two?
Especially when you're talking about the tax holidays, I've been going around and listening to Nairobians, and they have clearly stated what their needs are. At the forefront is economic empowerment. Everyone in Nairobi wants to have something to eat at the end of the day. Everyone in Nairobi wants to have their child educated. They're talking about proper infrastructure in schools, good health for their families, but especially on the economic front. When you're empowered economically, then you can be able to achieve all the rest of these other issues of society. So when Baba promises tax holidays, when he touches on women empowerment, giving incentives, giving relief, giving loans to these vulnerable groups, it addresses the issue directly, which is affecting the people of Nairobi. So I can say it is in tandem with the aspirations of the people of Nairobi.
Yes, and Wakili, strengthening some of the agencies, because corruption has been mentioned in all the candidates. They're saying I will root out corruption. It will be a no corruption zone. But we have agencies tasked with the mandate of investigating and prosecuting. EACC is one of them. Of course, we have the DCI and other state agencies. And they haven't been quite of help. The needs that Kenyans want is to see people convicted, not people named, not people talk about wash, talk about other economic crimes. How much more is needed? Because the agencies are there, but Kenyans are not seeing the fruits of that. Because if we're talking about 2 billion being stolen every day, that's quite something if we have EACC.
Now, as I said previously, for you to convict someone in a court of law, you need evidence. We know the process of having somebody convicted starts with investigation. Investigations are done by Director of Criminal Investigations in Kenya.
Just hold the thought kindly. Again, if you just joined us, this is KBC News Check, and we are looking at the state of politics in the country in the light of Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya coalition actually launching their blueprint of what they want to do, their manifesto for Kenyans, 100 days and the whole 5-year term, if at all they are given the mandate by Kenyans to lead this nation. And I'm joined by Paul Macharia, who is an advocate of the High Court, and also we have engineer John Onchari, apologies for that, on Otachi, who is vying for the Nairobi Senatorial seat on a KANU ticket. Just before we crossed over to the nurses and the healthcare workers, we were talking about how Kenyans looking at corruption. Corruption has been something that people are using as a campaign tool. We will get rid of this. But there are agencies tasked with ensuring that there is no corruption in Kenya, but Kenyans are not feeling the heat when it comes to prosecutions and people being assets being seized. We will have a government that will have no corruption at all.
Yes. what Kenyans need to understand is that as a country we have laws. We have systems that govern how things are done. Now, I know majority of who are not aware, they might expect that once Paul Macharia is accused of corruption, the next date he is going to sleep in custody, having been convicted of a crime, or having been convicted or accused of eating public money. Fortunately, in Kenya, we have laws, or what we call the criminal procedures, and the criminal justice exists. Now, criminal justice has several aspects. When one is accused, or one is accused of having committed a crime, they are arrested. An arrest follows investigations. Investigations are done by an independent body, and investigation in Kenya are done by the Director of Criminal Investigation, the DCI. Once investigations have been done, the file is forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Nurdin Haji. Once Mr. Nurdin Haji checks the evidence presented by the investigators, then he makes the decision to charge, and then a charge sheet will be drafted accusing Paul Macharia or any other individual of having stolen or having taken that which belongs to the public. Once that is done and you're taken to court, a charge sheet is read, you either agree to the charges or you disagree. Once you disagree, then it becomes incumbent upon the prosecutor to prove that indeed it is Paul Macharia who stole the money. He stole with his colleagues. The colleagues are listed as co-accused persons. Once that is done, whoever is accused will be given a chance to face the accusers, to challenge the evidence they are bringing before court. And then the court will make a determination that based on the evidence brought before the court, based on the witnesses who have testified, and looking at everything in entirety, we are convinced that indeed this accused person is guilty. That is a process. It involves several parties: the investigator, the prosecutors, the advocates for the accused person, and the court. The court is there. So for you to secure a prosecution, the process has to be checked by the four parties. The four parties then will give their view, then the court will make a determination.
So actually they are just politicizing the whole corruption issue, because even I'm quite sure even Otachi here will talk about how they are going to be looking at matters corruption. Is it being politicized and used as a campaign tool?
Of course, we know politics is politics. In politics, so many things can be done. Of course, we've seen as one of the strategy, and we have heard about it, that this individual, because he is not from my camp, he has done this and this, or this has been done by individuals in that camp. You know, ultimately the court is the determinant. There is what we call the court of public opinion. Of course, there is what the public will have opinion over. Ultimately, that opinion may differ from what the court has. So I think what needs to be done is a balance between the expectation of people. If people want to follow up on the cases, the courts are open. Anyone can go to court, can sit, can listen, can observe, can follow what is happening in a case. Because in most instances, people just have the story, unverified information. If one says, I'm guilty, I'm not guilty, this is guilty, this one is not guilty, this one stole, this one killed, the court ultimately will decide.
Okay. And Engineer Choti,
yes.
You are harboring senatorial ambitions. Yes. And looking at Nairobi, all the 46 counties will be looking at Nairobi. All East Africa will be looking at Nairobi. What are some of the ambitions that you have for this great county that people should look out for, bearing in mind that all eyes will be on Nairobi?
You rightly put it. Nairobi is the center of action.
Yeah, because I remember
Not
you said you also have a manifesto on the same.
Yes, of course. I also have my 5-point agenda that I would like to look at. But my 5-point agenda is mostly centered on the people of Nairobi, on the livelihoods of Nairobi. And some of this agenda that I have overlap with what the president or the presidential candidate for Azimio stands for. I'm looking at a situation, and this one I'm emphasizing because I've been around. Our youth are suffering. They're really suffering because wherever you go, they are saying, give us maziwa, give us milk. They mean, give us the little money, the 100 bob, 200 shillings, so we can be able to buy something for us to eat. Very interesting when we talk about something like manufacturing. Manufacturing is a critical component of our economy that we have to focus on. And there is a debate that is going on right now about mitumba. I am sure you've seen that.
Yes.
This is just one of the sections of manufacturing. Baba has addressed that issue and is saying, instead of us always importing second-hand clothes into the country, well, we have the capacity to manufacture our own, then we lose on opportunities of employment for our youth. Our opponents, they are very hot in social media platforms. They are speaking venom against that. And the argument is that Baba wants to kill Mitumba industry. Mitumba, if we talk about Gikomba, for example, it's a market where they sell predominantly second-hand clothes. The market is not going to be demolished. The same market can sell these brand new clothes which are manufactured in our country. You look at the chain, the value chain of manufacturing the shirt that you're wearing. It has to be planted either through cotton, that is farming. We empower the farmers to plant cotton. There is fertilizers which go into that. So the agrovets, get the support within the value chain of manufacturing clothes. We have the transport sector. These raw materials, transporting them to the factories, and from the factories to the market to Gikomba now. That's another sector you are uplifting. And also the middlemen, they make something of the entire chain. So let us be sincere and honest as a country. We want to remain at a state where we kill all the other 4 industries that I've spoken about: farming, transport, the agrovets, in preservation of only a market for second-hand clothes. Yeah, so these are some of the things we are looking at as a country. And within Nairobi, it is a manufacturing hub. It can be uplifted. More investment can be made in this sector. Then we thrive as an economy. And we can even serve our neighboring countries. Yeah, we can become the
5-point agenda. You say it's more or less in tandem with the Azimio blueprint that was announced yesterday.
Mostly, yes, because I'm talking about pillar number 1 is empowerment of the women, the youth, and people with disabilities. These are vulnerable groups economically. Yeah, that's my pillar number 1. That's my agenda number 1. And how do I do this? Is through legislation. I don't have a budget as a senator, but I will ensure that within the floor of Parliament or the Senate, we craft laws that support these groups. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm looking at affordable health care. Through legislation, affordable health care in your neighborhoods. You should be able to get qualified doctors. You should be able to have drugs in the medical facilities. We should be able to have maternity services. You will be surprised. Maternity services is a major issue.
Yes.
In especially informal settlement areas. I'm also looking at education, expanding infrastructure. I've been to the informal settlement areas, and you find that classrooms, which are supposed to be holding up to maybe 40 students or pupils, they're holding up to 80 or even 100. They're overcrowded.
No.
So through legislation, we can be able to push some of the monies into these areas.
No.
Yeah.
And Wakili, some people hailed the manifesto. Some have said it's a little bit over ambitious, but is it likely, if its implementation, likely to end up in court, where some people will challenge some of these things? If we are talking about a stipend of 6,000 shillings, you have to show us where you're going to get that money and which criteria is going to be used to identify the most vulnerable families. If you're talking about a monthly upkeep for single mothers, that's another something else that we have to factor in the budget. If you're talking about continuing all these things, that 35% going to devolution, 7 years tax holidays, are they not going to be some, because we've seen everything is challenged in court. We've seen petitions each and every day. You announce something, the following day is being challenged in court.
So as just back to where we started from, manifesto is an intimation, an invitation is an expressed will by a candidate. What will happen when Baba gets into power, using the executive power, he can come up with policies. We have executive policies. If it is passed as a policy that the government will implement this, a good example is the free education, free primary education.
Actually, he said in the manifesto, you are going all the way to university.
It is something achievable if it is implemented, because it is a will to do something. Now what happens when he gets into power? He have to marshal the required resources, the required institution. If a law is required for that to be done, the parties that are in support will come up with the law. If a particular policy needs to be passed, Baba has he will have the executive mandate to pass that policy. So what happens when the government takes power? It will have the whole brigadier, the whole group working with it, so that implementation of those mandates becomes easy. For something to be implemented as a law, it has to go through the parliament. If it is budget with for issuance of 6,000, there needs to be a law. This law will come up with how do we identify the person to pay? How do we pay them? When do we pay them? How do we resolve a dispute of non-payment? A law will be created. The issue of school, a policy, a law will be created, because it is an agenda. What I said, every government has its agenda. If the government has numbers, and the good senator here will agree with me that if the Senate has the number to pass a law, if that law is in conformity with the government agenda, nothing will bar that, because they have the number. Once the law is passed, the test to invalidate a law also exists, so that not every person can rush to court to challenge law without any reason to do that. Of course, the Constitution, Article 10 provides there is the aspect of public participation. If the law is to be passed and the public participation is needed, for that law to be effective and to be applied, it has to go through that test. So the issue of being challenged, it can only be challenged as a law if it has not followed the steps that are required in passing a law. Public participation, public opinion. The Constitution recognizes the will of the people. These are the people you elected. These are the people, you listen to them. The issues, you have them, you address their issues. If that is done and it becomes a law, nothing prohibits the government from giving people money, from empowering them, from giving them loans.
Okay, there are some countries who have managed at least to have that.
It has happened.
In their system.
One of a good country that have a good social aspect is Singapore. Singapore, the social capital, the social approach to issues, it's way ahead, because there are laws there are policies, there are systems that work together with the government institutions to ensure that the government agenda is achieved. Yes.
Okay, thank you. As we wind up, your final words. Kenyans are so much expectant. They want, if at all, either of the government that will seize power to actualize what they've said, because we have seen earlier manifestos not honored to the letter. As we wind up.
As Wakili rightly put it, a manifesto is a social contract. You cannot enforce it in law, but then you can hold our leaders to account. Remember, even if we elect a president, they do not enter office. There shouldn't be a disconnect between the office of the president and the people. He is the highest representative of the people. We also have parliamentarians, we have MCS, we have senators who are also supposed to check the executive and ensure that they honor their promise. So from the side of Azimio, I would really hope, and I know for sure, that our captain is committed to implementing the manifesto to the letter. Yes.
Indeed. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And of course, as soon as Kenya Kwanza releases its manifesto, we will have at least a member. We've had engineer who is a member of KANU, and he will be seeking the Nairobi Senatorial seat on a KANU ticket. And we also had Wakili here who actually to put things into perspective so that we may not spill over and have issues with the law. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making the time.
Yes,
thank you
so much for
hosting us.
Thank you so much. And in our second hour, we're taking a short break, but we will be looking at independent candidates. Why? This year, we have so many independent candidates. The presidency, the list was so long, 55 candidates, narrowed down to 4. Some say that we don't like how the KBC is doing its things. They just want to lock us out, and we want our own voice. We don't want to be affiliated with any political parties. What are the pros, the cons? What are some of the things that the independent candidates have to undergo as opposed to candidates who are affiliated to political parties? We'll be back with that discussion. Don't go away.